Hey everyone, it's Sammy from Push Square, and last week I was lucky enough to play Days Gone for the first time. Now, this was an absolutely gigantic demo. I got to see 3 hours of the game, and it included the opening mission, and also I got to sort of play around in the open world without following a sort of set path, so I could see how the gameplay is structured, and just sort of explore on my own, which was really cool and actually quite unusual for these kind of preview events. Now I have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to get into it in this video, but before I do, please do remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and with that said, let's talk Days Gone.
Hey.
Hey.
So I'm sort of lost. I was hoping you could help me out.
I'm sorry, you're lost?
Yeah, I'm looking for the old Belknap Road, and there's not a lot of signs around here.
You gotta be kidding me.
Nope.
What? What is it? What? It's great. That is just perfect. That is great. That is great.
So about those directions?
I'm really sorry. I don't know where Belknap, Belknap, that's the one. And I don't know where it is. I really can't help you. I'm sorry.
So no, then?
Nope.
Okay. Well, thanks anyway.
Hey!
Okay, so I think Guerrilla Games got a lot of credit correctly when it transitioned from the linear Helgen corridors of Killzone Shadowfall to the vast open expanses of Horizon Zero Dawn, but I think Sony Bend may actually be making one of the biggest leaps in gaming history with its all-new apocalyptic IP, Days Gone. So for the past 15 years or so, the Oregon-based outfit has been working almost exclusively on handhelds, and while the team may argue that PlayStation Vita launch title Uncharted Golden Abyss had the production values of a full-scale console game, the reality is that protagonist Deacon St. John's encounter with the undead is bigger than anything it's ever attempted in its 20+ year history. Now, the pressure must be absolutely immense on the first-party studio. The game follows a spate of Sony award winners, including last year's God of War, Detroit Become Human, and Marvel's Spider-Man. But after an enormous 3-hour hands-on session, like I said, I can safely say that the ex-Siphon Filter studio has really risen to the occasion, and while this survival horror-tinged open world doesn't have quite the same creative flair as some of the aforementioned, it really does have an air of kind of comfort food to it that's sure to satisfy even the most discerning gamer. Now, you know it's a Sony published game because the demo begins with a prologue as Deacon kind of helps his injured wife aboard a helicopter. Now, the theme of the game, at least in the demo specifically, is that it's all about loyalty, and despite this clearly being the love of his life, and you'll have seen the trailers I hope, he decides to stay behind in order to help his motorcycle riding mate, a guy called Boozer. Now, the scene uses every cliche in the book to help build a connection to its cast, and while it's never going to leave you streaming like, say, The Last of Us's incredible opener, it's fair to say that the production values really are right up there with what you'd expect from a PlayStation 4 exclusive, and that's impressive when you consider Sony Bend's size. In fact, the entire opening hour is a bit of a roller coaster as the game fast forwards to a bearded Deacon who's in pursuit of a rival gang on his motorcycle. Now, controlling the drifter bike is pretty loose, but once you learn more advanced techniques like boosting and sliding, it's a surprisingly fun form of navigation, which is an essential in any good open world game. The really unique thing about the motorbike is that it kind of becomes your sanctuary when you're out in the field. You can only save when you're next to it, and its resources run dry pretty quickly, meaning that if you deplete your fuel reserves, then you're going to have to head out on foot in search of more. While structurally the title has more in common with, say, Far Cry than Resident Evil, it's pretty obvious that resource management is going to be essential over the course of the campaign. ammunition and items in general are in short supply, and the title's really good at putting you in situations where you feel like you only have just enough assets to survive. It's really incredibly easy to stumble into situations where you're ill-equipped to deal with them, and so this really does add a sense of tension to the open world. Sneaking past a couple of snivelling freakers in order to get to a fuel canister can really be a white knuckle experience, and it's the kind of off the beaten path gameplay that makes the out of mission encounters all the more engaging. But this is an open world game, and I'll be honest with you, Sony Bend isn't really reinventing the book. Camps contain various characters who end up either being quest givers or merchants, and the campaign appears to be divided into a sequence of story threads, each feeding into an overall narrative that I have some suspicions that I know where it's going. One mission, for example, sees you heading out to a rundown neighbourhood in order to rescue a teenager who's been living alone since the collapse of society. The cutscenes are actually pretty decent, and while it's nothing you won't have seen before, the actors do a decent job of working with a slightly cheesy script.
I should have won first place, but Missy King, she cheated.
Lisa, you hear the gunshots outside? It's not safe here.
I was
Now,
at school. And my mom called me and told me to come home right away and not stop, and they would be here waiting for me, and we would leave together, and I got here and there was a note that said they left with some men, and I didn't know what to do, so I hid. I didn't know what to do.
It's alright, it's okay, it's okay.
But what I really like is that the missions are actually open-ended by design, so you can choose how you want to approach encounters. Now, I'll be honest, the gunplay isn't the greatest, but there are some really good sound effects here, and they've really improved since some of the first trailers, and when you pair those with robust hit reactions, it makes for some pretty satisfying gauntlets against both human and undead enemies. Of course, you can also approach stealthily if you prefer, and you can create your own makeshift melee weapons out of materials that you find in the world. It's all fairly standard stuff, but say using rocks to lure enemies into the vicinity of explosive canisters and then letting rip, it rarely ever gets old, does it, to be honest? Of course, when you're forced into playing spontaneously, a good user interface is essential, and while Days Gone's radial menu can take a little getting used to, it makes crafting on the fly a breeze. You can build everything from Molotov cocktails to crossbow arrows in a jiffy, and there's a full skill tree that obviously feeds into how quickly and effectively you can construct things. To be fair, I have to be honest, the entire user interface is really a thing of beauty, and it's a sign of how much care and effort the developers invested into this game overall. It really does feel very polished, and that's perhaps an indication of how delays have helped the project reach its full potential. The only real oversight I have from a kind of technical perspective is that the cutscenes don't run in engine, which may sound very minor, but it makes transitions between gameplay and cinematics irritatingly obvious. Unfortunately for Sony Bend, there are games like God of War which have pushed the industry forward in this regard, and it can feel strangely archaic as the game constantly fades to black for video playback, then repeats the entire Sorry saga once more to put you back in control. Many of you will be able to overlook this, I understand that, but it really did stick out to me like a sore thumb. I also have to say that running on a PS4 Pro, it did seem a little bit framey, particularly when you're coursing through the open world on your bike. I didn't actually encounter the title's trademark World War Z-esque hordes during my hands-on, so I am a little bit concerned that performance will struggle when there are so many enemies on the screen as well. On the flip side though, the world really does feel like it's alive. There's wildlife everywhere minding its own business, and of course there are freakers stumbling about as well. There are even rival gangs that are dotted around the map, and while their ranks include a cringe-inducing cult who kind of have RIP carved into their foreheads, it means you have to keep a really close eye out for traps before you ride into them unsuspectingly. The game eases the constant sense of tension that you experience in the open world with flashback sequences, and these are designed to, in the case of my demo at least, explore Deacon's relationship with his wife. Now, this does help to flesh out the characters, and the writing is actually quite sweet as the young lovers bounce off one another with witty one-liners. My only concern is that I feel like I can see a twist coming a mile away, and I just hope that I'm mistaken about that. Days Gone though is pretty much exactly what I expected it to be, but at the same time I feel like that's a little bit reductive. The production values really are practically on par with Sony's premier first-party studios, which is impressive when you consider Ben's back catalogue, it really is, and the gameplay loop appears to be pretty damn strong, with limited resources lending a real sense of tension to each and every encounter, whether they're with the living or the living dead. The bike does add a unique twist as it becomes your sanctuary out in the field and something that you actually need to plan around, but these are the game's idiosyncrasies, and once you take those out, you have to say that the game isn't reinventing the wheel. And while that's not a bad thing at all, I have to say that if you are burned out on franchises like Far Cry, then don't expect this outing to rip up the rulebook, even if protagonist Deacon St. John does look like he has a rebellious streak. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Have I convinced you to get Days Gone? Have I put you off? Do you have any questions about the game? I'll be happy to try and answer as much of those, or as many of those as I can. Please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, thank you so much for watching.